Now, before we continue, this Fir'aun, who he is and what time he lived in, has been a subject of great debate and controversy. And the fact of the matter is that in our Islamic sources, in our Muslim sources, it is very, very clear his lineage and the name of Fir'aun and his lineage. And so the scholars mention that there were, if we go back to the books of history, the books of Tariq, like that of Ibn Kathir and al-Tabari and many others, and likewise we return back to the books of Tafsir, and we will find very, very clearly that the following, I will just summarize the main points in the following. First of all, that there was a series of Fir'auns who were present at the same time of Ibrahim alayhi salam to Musa alayhi salam. Right? So Ibrahim alayhi salam to Musa alayhi salam is a period of roughly around 200 years. In that time period, there was a series of rulers whose names are given in our history books who also existed at the same time. Right? And they were those who ruled over Misr. And so, from the first of them is mentioned Sinan bin Alwan. Sinan bin Alwan. And the genealogy of these Fir'auns, they go back to the son of Sam, who is called Lawith, and from him came, there's an offspring called Amliq, and from him came many people who were known as the Amaliqah. And you will find this word often in the Torah, in the Bible, the Amalekites. And these are hated, they're always spoken of in a hateful way, right, as the enemy. They're repeated many times in the Torah. So this is the Amaliqah. In our sources, they are known as the Amaliqah. And so these tribes, they originated out of Yemen, and they moved northwards and they conquered many places. So they conquered the Hijaz region around Mecca. And so one of these Amaliqah was known as Fir'aun. And that's why the area around Mecca and the mountains around Mecca, it is known as Fir'aun, tracing back to that individual from the Amaliqah who, conquered and controlled that area. That's why it is said, and that's why this is actually mentioned in the Torah, the wilderness of Fir'aun, referring to the area around Mecca. Likewise, they moved further north and they conquered parts of Sham and across even Iraq. Okay? So, in the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam to Musa alayhi salam, there was a stretch of land that was conquered by these people. And these people were warlike people. They were into war and conquest. And so they conquered the region from the top of Syria. If you imagine the top of Syria here next to Turkey, the coastal region, coming down towards Lebanon, coming down towards Palestine, moving across the Sinai Peninsula and across to the top of what today we know to be Egypt, right? Which is the top, very fertile region of Egypt, where the river Nile, it comes and it splits and then it goes all into the Mediterranean, right? This is the Nile. It comes up and it splits in so many different rivers, and this very green, fertile area right at the top, this area, they were in rule at that time, right? They were in rule at that time. So these are Arab rulers, not Egyptian. They are not Qibti. Okay? As for the original rulers of Egypt, they were forced further south. So they were south of what we today call Egypt. They were not the rulers whom Ibrahim or Yusuf or Musa alayhi salam interacted with. Right? So this is a huge difference between what is in our history books the Islamic history books and what is in or what is implied in the Torah, and likewise in all of Western scholarship and all of what they call the Egyptology, the science and study of Egypt and the history of Egypt and whatever else. And because they've made this fundamental mistake in history, when they've tried to research these things and they've gone to these, it's a mistake to call the rulers of Egypt pharaohs, because they were never ever known as pharaohs. This is a mistake. They were never known as pharaohs. This is a mistake that's been made, where the name of Fir'aun has been extended to these Egyptian rulers. This is a mistake in history. They were never called pharaohs. In fact, one of the historians, Muslim historians, al-Mas'udi, he mentions how he went to Egypt and Misr, and he asked many of the specialists from the Qibtis, right? They asked him, tell me about the origin and the meaning of this word Fir'aun. And they said, well, we've got no idea, because it's not from our language. We don't know what its origin is. He said they couldn't tell me what it is, because aslan it is not from the Qibtis, from their language. Rather, as we shall as is made clear, Fir'aun is an actual name. So Fir'aun, you see Haman, Qarun, you see many other similar names, Shamsun, Jad'un, right? They all follow the same pattern. These are well-known Arab names. Okay? So this is the first thing we should very, very clearly understand. That those who were in rule at the time when Ibrahim alayhi salam came to the first Fir'aun, Sinan bin Alwan, and there was a story between him, his wife Sarah. This was from the Amalika. Then after him, there were a series of 5 or 6 other rulers. The one in the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, his name is Ar-Rayyan bin al-Walid. Ar-Rayyan bin al-Walid, an Arabic name, right? So this was the time when Yusuf al-Islam went to this location, and he was given a position, and the whole story in Surah Yusuf, it takes place in relation to this individual, Ar-Rayyan bin al-Walid. And then from him, after him, came a number of other rulers. After him came, there's a couple of other names, and then comes one called Qabus bin Mus'ab, and then comes Al-Walid bin Mus'ab. Al-Walid bin Mus'ab. So this is the one that our Muslim sources identify as the Fir'aun. Now there's the discussion as to what his actual name is, and the evidence from the Quran very strongly suggests that Fir'aun is his actual name. Fir'aun is his actual name, because the way this word is used, it's used as a proper name, right? All the evidence in the Quran very, very clearly indicates that, because there's no definite article attached to it. It's not pluralized ever, and it's mentioned along with other names in between the names: Qarun, Fir'aun, Haman, or Haman, Fir'aun, Qarun, right? So all the evidence suggests that it's an actual name of Fir'aun. So this name Fir'aun, because he was a tyrant, it was then extended to include all of the other previous 6 or 7 rulers who were from the Amalika. So then they became known as the Fir'auns, al-Fara'ina. So then this word was pluralized that we normally see, and it was made as a title, al-Fara'ina, even though Fir'aun was that one individual. And then mistakenly that label was then given to all of the Egyptian kings in the whole of history, before Ibrahim alayhi salam and after Musa alayhi salam. And this is a mistake in the history of Al-Qibt, of Egypt, right? They were never known as Fir'auns or as pharaohs. So because of that mistake, and there are also some ideological reasons as well. So you see the Jews, for example, they deliberately make it appear as if Musa alayhi salam was present in Egypt till about 1200 BC. So they extend the stretch of Bani Israel in Egypt from what is really 180 years to 500 years, right? To make it appear as if they were there for a very, very long time, and they were there in the time of the Egyptian so-called pharaohs, right? And they have an ideological reason to make that fallacious claim, to make that false claim, right? Because they can say, we deserve a piece of that land, right? So that's a fallacious claim. It's a clear fallacious claim. And the reality is that the time of Bani Israel in Misr was between around 1720 to 1570, right? Between 1750, let's say, even between the middle of the 18th century BC to about the end of the 16th century BC. It's about 180 years in total they spent in Misr. And that's clear even from the lineage. If you take it from Ya'qub alayhi salam, how many people between Ya'qub alayhi salam? We said Musa bin Imran bin Qahith bin Azir bin Lawi bin Ya'qub. That's basically 4 generations. 4 generations. And 4 generations is 150 years at the most, right? So clearly it can't be a period of 500 years. So now we've explained Musa, his lineage, and we've explained Fir'aun and who he is. These rulers were known as the Amalika, as I mentioned. If you go into Western scholarship, you will find that these people are identified by the label Hyksos. 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 This name was given to them by Greek historians. But the meaning of the word Hyksos is the same as the meaning of Amalika. But you would never know if you didn't know this history. And you would never know from the word Hyksos that these were actual Arabs. Right? And so this is not really discussed openly. You won't find it in popular textbooks or in the popular stories of Musa and Fir'aun for whatever reason. But this is what is in our books. And that's why that's what explains the fact that these people can't find any mention of the story of Musa alayhi salam amongst the Qibti rulers, because the issue was never with the Qibti rulers. So that's why in the archaeology and everything and in the history, the Egyptians were very good at history. They recorded all of their rulers, the names from 3,000-4,000, 1,000 years back, even further back, all the names, all the dynasties, and they can't find anything, right? And that's because they've got their history wrong. And what we find in our sources is correct. And there is an admission now amongst, you'll find that in the past 20-30 years that they are admitting, because the archaeology has been going on for like 70-80 years, 100 years now, and not finding anything. But now in the past 2-3 decades there's an admission that there was a dynasty called the Hyksos dynasty. They were Amalekites, which means Arabs, and that their time coincides with the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam. Right? And this is the haqq that we had for, from our sources. This kalam batil is false. It's a lie, it's a kadhib. Because there are about 20-30 mummies which are preserved. So how can that be true then if all these other mummies are preserved as well then? It's not true. This was something spread by an individual called Maurice Bucaille back in the 80s. He wrote a book called The Quran, Bible and Science, which is full of lies and untruths and falsehoods. The proper explanation of the body of Fir'aun according to the Mufassirin, and also this brings into the issue of where exactly was he drowned. Even the Yahud are not sure. Some say the Red Sea on the side of Arabia. Some say the Red Sea on the side of Egypt, because there's 2 parts, isn't there? There's the Egyptian side and then there's the Arabian side, right? Some say no, it was further down in the bridge between Ethiopia and Yemen. Bab al-Mandal they call it, right? It's a stretch of 20 miles, right? Some say, so they even then they are not agreed upon where it actually happened. But what our sources say, what the Quran says, and what we see is that the Bani Israel could physically see with the eyes, with the vision of the eyes, Fir'aun and his troops being destroyed. And they physically saw with the eyes, they recognized his body, because what happened is they first of all disbelieved that Fir'aun was dead. So Allah Azza wa Jal ordered that river to spit out his body and to put it on the coast, so they could see themselves that he was there with his shield, that this is Fir'aun who is dead. He's died, he's dead. Right? So that's what the ayah means, that this day have we preserved your body so that you might be a sign. Meaning a sign to Bani Israel that indeed you are dead. Right? And then after that, what happened to his body? You know, it definitely wasn't saved as a mummy, because he was not an Qibti to begin with. He's not Egyptian. If you have the right history, you won't have these problems. Do you understand? All these stupid nonsense that we are fed by non-Muslims who are trying to make fools of us, and for us to misunderstand our own sources and texts. Do you understand? So Egyptians would mummify their bodies, right? But here with the Arabs, they didn't used to do that. So again? No, Misr is that area, but we see the Egyptians and all the nations that ruled over Egypt never called it Misr. Right? If you go back to the original rulers of Egypt, going back 3, 4, 5,000 years, they used to call it, there's a name called it, they call it Het Gabta. Right? This then what led to the naming of Al-Gibt and Egypt or Egypt, right? That transformation. So even the nations who conquered them and ruled over them, like the Romans at one time, the Greeks at one time, the Persians at one time, they all referred to that land as Al-Gibt, right? So, and because Fir'aun was not an Egyptian, he is an Amalek Arab, right? It's important for us to understand that distinction, that the Quran says Misr, and the Sunnah says Misr, and our scholars say Misr, right? If we don't make that distinction, then we fall back into that same problem of saying, well, it was the Egyptian pharaohs when it wasn't. It was the Egyptian rulers when it wasn't the Egyptian rulers. Do you understand? So the Misr is that region where today it's basically Cairo, Ismailiyah, that fertile region known as a trade route and a trade hub. That area. Yeah, that area. Yeah, basically that area, yeah. Again, you have to understand that borders and boundaries are not the same over thousands of years. Do you understand? So what is today the state of Egypt going all the way down south, whatever, that's not what Misr means necessarily when it's referred to in the Quran. It's referring to that top area, right? Whereas to the Egyptians, Al-Gibt, it means maybe something different. Yeah.